Have you ever met someone who insists they're an exceptional driver despite their history of fender benders? Or perhaps you've caught yourself believing you could easily predict stock market movements after a lucky investment. These common experiences point to a fascinating quirk in human psychology. We systematically overestimate our abilities, knowledge, and future prospects. This psychological tendency, known as the overconfidence bias, affects our decisions in profound ways, from financial investments to career choices, relationships, and even matters of life and death. As Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman puts it, overconfidence is the most significant of the cognitive biases. Today, we'll explore this pervasive mental shortcut that leads ordinary people to believe they're extraordinary, experts to misjudge their predictions, and all of us to harbor illusions about our capabilities. We'll examine its origins, manifestations, consequences, and most importantly, how we might overcome it to make better decisions in an uncertain world. Overconfidence isn't a single phenomenon, but manifests in at least 3 distinct ways, each affecting our thinking and decision-making differently. First is overestimation, where we believe we're better than we actually are. This appears when students predict higher test scores than they achieve, when project managers forecast earlier completion dates than they deliver, or when entrepreneurs expect higher success rates than statistics justify. As one study found, 93% of American drivers rate themselves as above average, a mathematical impossibility that reveals our tendency to overestimate our skills. Second is overplacement, where we believe we're better than others. This explains why 94% of professors rate their teaching abilities as above average, why 90% of business managers rate their performance above their peers, and why most people believe they're more ethical than the average person. This better-than-average effect persists even when we're presented with clear evidence to the contrary. Third is over-precision, where we're excessively certain about our beliefs or predictions. This appears when investors are too confident in their market forecasts, when doctors are too certain of their diagnosis, or when we're convinced we know exactly what caused a past event. Studies show that when people are 90% confident in their answers, they're typically right only 70 to 80% of the time, a calibration error that reveals our tendency toward unwarranted certainty. As psychologist Scott Plass notes, no problem in judgment and decision-making is more prevalent and more potentially catastrophic than overconfidence. Why would evolution equip us with such a seemingly flawed cognitive mechanism? The answer lies in understanding that our brains evolved not for accuracy, but for survival and reproduction. In ancestral environments, confidence, even when somewhat misplaced, often provided competitive advantages. The confident hunter was more likely to pursue challenging prey, the confident warrior more likely to intimidate rivals, and the confident suitor more likely to attract mates. As evolutionary psychologist David Buss observes, displays of confidence serve as fitness indicators, signaling potential genetic quality to prospective partners. Moreover, confidence enhances social influence. Throughout human history, those who projected certainty attracted followers more effectively than those who expressed doubt. Imagine 2 prehistoric tribal leaders. One confidently points toward distant mountains, declaring, "Water lies beyond those hills," while another admits, "I'm uncertain where we might find water." Which would you follow if your survival depended on it? Overconfidence also provided psychological benefits. The slightly overconfident individual experienced less anxiety, took more productive risks, and persisted longer in the face of challenges. Think about it. Would humans have attempted dangerous ocean voyages, developed complex technologies, or built massive civilizations if they had perfectly accurate assessments of the overwhelming obstacles? As Robert Trivers, a pioneer in evolutionary psychology, suggests, we evolved to deceive ourselves, the better to deceive others. This self-deception allowed our ancestors to project the confidence that enhanced their social standing and reproductive success, even when that confidence wasn't entirely warranted. Several specific mental processes work together to create and maintain our overconfidence. The confirmation bias leads us to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms our existing beliefs, while discounting contradictory evidence. When you believe you're a skilled negotiator, you'll readily recall the deals you closed successfully while forgetting or dismissing those where you failed to get favorable terms. The availability heuristic causes us to base judgments on information that comes readily to mind. Since our successes tend to be more memorable and accessible than our failures, we overestimate our capabilities by relying on these easily recalled positive examples. Motivated reasoning further amplifies overconfidence, as we unconsciously reason toward conclusions we prefer. We want to see ourselves as competent, knowledgeable, and in control, so our cognitive processes obligingly deliver assessments that support this desired self-image. The illusion of control leads us to overestimate our influence over events, particularly when we're actively involved. This explains why lottery players prefer to choose their own numbers, and why investors believe they can outperform the market through active trading. In one revealing study, factory workers were given buttons labeled as controlling machine operation, when the buttons actually did nothing. Yet workers reported feeling greater satisfaction and believed they improved production quality, simply because they felt in control. Finally, the planning fallacy causes us to underestimate the time, costs, and risks associated with future actions. We focus on best-case scenarios and discount potential obstacles, leading to systematic overconfidence in our plans and predictions. Ask yourself, when was the last time you completed a complex project exactly on schedule and within budget? As cognitive scientist Stephen Sloman notes, our minds are not built to see themselves, they are built to see the world. This limited metacognitive capacity, our difficulty in accurately assessing our own thinking, creates fertile ground for overconfidence to flourish. Overconfidence doesn't affect all areas of life equally. Research has identified specific domains where this bias is particularly pronounced. In education, students consistently predict higher grades than they achieve, with the least competent students showing the largest overestimation. One study found that students in the bottom quartile of actual performance predicted they would perform in the 60th percentile, a dramatic miscalibration of. In finance, overconfidence drives excessive trading, inadequate diversification, and boom-bust cycles. Individual investors consistently believe they can beat the market despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. As finance professor Terence Odeon demonstrated, the most frequently traded accounts typically yield the lowest returns, a direct consequence of overconfidence. In medicine, physician overconfidence contributes to diagnostic errors, unnecessary treatments, and patient harm. A study at a major teaching hospital found that when doctors expressed absolute certainty about their diagnosis, they were wrong 40% of the time. Consider the implications: doctors most confident in their judgments were wrong nearly half the time. In politics, overconfidence leads to policy failures, military misadventures, and resistance to compromise. Leaders too certain of their judgments dismiss warning signs and alternative perspectives, sometimes with catastrophic consequences. When President George W. Bush declared mission accomplished in Iraq in 2003, it reflected a catastrophic overconfidence that overlooked the complexity of nation-building in a fractured society. In professional calibration, studies show that weather forecasters have remarkably well-calibrated confidence. When they say there's a 70% chance of rain, it rains about 70% of the time. In contrast, medical specialists, financial analysts, and intelligence officers tend to show significant overconfidence despite their expertise. This suggests that regular, immediate feedback on predictions is crucial for developing appropriate confidence levels. As psychologist Philip Tetlock notes, after studying expert predictions, we reach the point of diminishing marginal predictive returns for knowledge disconcertingly quickly. In other words, a little knowledge often creates a lot of confidence, but much more knowledge is needed to significantly improve accuracy. Overconfidence isn't expressed uniformly across demographic groups, revealing how social factors shape this cognitive tendency. Gender differences and overconfidence are complex and context-dependent. In domains traditionally associated with masculinity, men typically exhibit greater overconfidence than women. Male investors trade more frequently and experience lower returns as a result. Male students overestimate their academic performance more than female students, particularly in STEM fields. However, these differences diminish or disappear in domains where women have traditional advantages or when controlling for socialization factors. Women show equal or greater confidence in realms like social intelligence, emotional perception, and verbal abilities. The confidence gap appears to reflect societal expectations and experiences rather than innate differences. Cultural variations in overconfidence are equally revealing. Studies show that Western cultures, particularly the United States, exhibit higher levels of overconfidence than Eastern cultures like Japan and China. This reflects Western emphasis on individualism and self-promotion versus Eastern values of humility and self-improvement. However, economic development and modernization appear to increase overconfidence across cultures, suggesting that certain social structures and incentives promote this bias regardless of traditional cultural values. As psychologist Stephen Hine observes, cultural differences in self-enhancement are among the largest effects found in cultural psychology. These differences underscore how overconfidence isn't simply a universal human trait, but is shaped by social context and cultural narratives. The expression of overconfidence varies significantly throughout human development, offering insights into both its origins and potential remedies. Children display remarkable levels of optimism and overconfidence from an early age. By age 4, most children believe they can do virtually anything they set their minds to, from becoming astronauts to learning any language overnight. This developmental pattern suggests that overconfidence may be our psychological default state rather than an acquired distortion. Adolescence brings a unique vulnerability to overconfidence, particularly in risk assessment. The combination of a developing prefrontal cortex and heightened reward sensitivity explains why teenagers consistently underestimate risks while overestimating their ability to navigate dangerous situations. Ask any parent of a teenager about their child's belief in their own driving abilities despite limited experience. Young adulthood often represents the peak of overconfidence, with individuals in their 20s showing the highest levels of optimism bias regarding future life outcomes. Research by neuroscientist Tali Sherat has demonstrated that young adults maintain unrealistically positive expectations even when presented with statistical evidence contradicting their rosy forecasts. Middle age typically brings some calibration of confidence, as accumulated experience provides feedback on our actual capabilities and limitations. This period often features what psychologists call the middle knowledge phenomenon, sufficient expertise to recognize complexity, but without the mastery that might restore simple confidence. Contrary to stereotypes about stubbornness, older adults often demonstrate better calibrated confidence judgments than younger cohorts. The accumulation of experience across diverse situations appears to enhance metacognitive accuracy, allowing seniors to more accurately assess what they know and don't know. This finding suggests that wisdom may involve not greater knowledge per se, but greater awareness of knowledge boundaries. This developmental trajectory offers hope that overconfidence can be mitigated through experience and reflection, though formal education seems to have surprisingly little impact on confidence calibration without specific training in probability and uncertainty. While overconfidence can lead to costly errors, it also confers significant benefits that help explain its persistence despite its drawbacks. On the positive side, overconfidence motivates action and persistence in the face of obstacles. Studies show that slightly overconfident entrepreneurs are more likely to secure funding, launch ventures, and persist through initial failures than their more accurately calibrated peers. It reduces anxiety about uncertain outcomes, enhances social influence and leadership effectiveness, and promotes risk-taking that can lead to innovation and discovery. Additionally, it improves subjective well-being through positive self-views. As psychologist Shelley Taylor notes in her work on positive illusions, moderate overconfidence can be adaptive, leading to better mental health and more productive behavior than strictly accurate self-assessment. However, the costs of overconfidence are substantial. It can lead to inadequate preparation for challenges and obstacles, excessive risk-taking resulting in preventable failures, and resource misallocation to projects with low probability of success. Overconfidence can also inhibit learning by preventing the recognition of mistakes and strain relationships by fostering an inability to acknowledge limitations. The balance between these benefits and costs depends on the specific context and degree of overconfidence. Would the Wright brothers have attempted flight, or would Edison have persisted through thousands of failed light bulb designs without some degree of overconfidence? As Daniel Kahneman observes, what makes overconfidence a cognitive bias is that it systematically exceeds accuracy, not that it necessarily leads to suboptimal outcomes. Throughout history, overconfidence has contributed to catastrophic failures across domains, offering cautionary tales about the dangers of excessive certainty. The sinking of the unsinkable Titanic in 1912 represents a classic case of technological overconfidence. The ship's designers and operators were so confident in their creation that they provided lifeboats for only about half the passengers and crew. This tragic miscalculation cost over 1,500 lives when the unthinkable happened. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986 resulted partly from operators' overconfidence in their ability to safely conduct a risky test despite warning signs. The test team consistently ignored safety protocols, believing their expertise would allow them to manage any complications that arose. Their confidence proved catastrophically misplaced. Financial history reveals repeated patterns of overconfidence. Before the 2008 global financial crisis, Wall Street's mathematical models supposedly proved that complex mortgage-backed securities were virtually risk-free. Quants and executives were so confident in their risk assessments that they leveraged their firms 30-to-1 or higher, amplifying eventual losses when housing prices fell. The hubris of financial engineering collided with market realities, bringing down centuries-old institutions in days. In 2014, health officials initially expressed excessive confidence in existing protocols to contain Ebola, underestimating the challenges of implementing theoretical safeguards in real-world conditions. CDC Director Thomas Frieden initially assured Americans, "We know how to stop Ebola with strict infection control practices," only to later acknowledge significant gaps in preparedness when nurses became infected, despite following recommended procedures. The Mars Climate Orbiter mission failure in 1999 resulted from engineers' overconfidence in their calculations and assumptions. The $125 million spacecraft was lost because one team used metric units, while another used imperial units, a basic error that went undetected because team members were so confident in their work that they didn't implement sufficient cross-checking. These examples demonstrate how overconfidence becomes most dangerous precisely when stakes are highest, when careful assessment of risks and limitations is most crucial. As historian Barbara Tuchman observed in her analysis of historical blunders, wooden-headedness, the source of self-deception, is a factor that plays a remarkably large role in government. It consists in assessing a situation in terms of preconceived fixed notions, while ignoring or rejecting any contrary signs. Our information ecosystem has undergone radical transformation in recent decades, creating new dimensions to overconfidence. The Internet has democratized access to information, allowing anyone to gain surface-level familiarity with virtually any topic through a few quick searches. This easy access often creates an illusion of understanding that amplifies overconfidence. As one study demonstrated, people who simply looked up answers in Google subsequently rated their own cognitive abilities higher, a phenomenon researchers called the Google effect. Have you ever read a few articles on a complex topic like quantum physics or macroeconomics, and then felt qualified to debate experts in the field? Social media platforms further compound the problem by providing selective feedback that reinforces overconfidence. Echo chambers reinforce existing beliefs, while algorithms promote content that generates engagement, typically more extreme, certain positions rather than nuanced, careful analysis. The most confident voices gain amplification regardless of accuracy. The Dunning-Kruger effect, where those with the least knowledge often express the most confidence, finds perfect expression in online forums where self-proclaimed experts confidently share misinformation. Studies show that exposure to an hour of specialized information often creates peak confidence that actual experts would never claim after years of study. Information overload in the digital age also contributes to what researchers call knowledge fragmentation, the acquisition of discrete facts without the conceptual frameworks needed to integrate them meaningfully. This creates the sensation of understanding without its substance, further fueling overconfidence. As communication scholar Zeynep Tufekci observes, the Internet didn't create overconfidence, but it created perfect conditions for it to thrive. The challenge in our digital environment is not accessing information, but developing the metacognitive skills to accurately assess our understanding of that information. Experts across fields consistently demonstrate overconfidence in their forecasts, with troubling implications for how societies manage uncertainty. Political scientist Philip Tetlock's landmark study of expert predictions, which analyzed 28,000 forecasts over 20 years, found that experts performed only slightly better than chance and significantly worse than simple algorithms. Most disturbingly, Tetlock found an inverse relationship between experts' fame and their predictive accuracy. The most celebrated and confident pundits were often the least reliable forecasters. These highly visible experts rarely suffered reputational consequences for failed predictions, instead offering post hoc explanations that preserved their authority. Consider these expert pronouncements that proved catastrophically wrong. In 1977, Ken Olsen, the founder of Digital Equipment Corporation, famously declared, "There is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home." Just a few decades later, personal computers became a household staple, transforming how we work, communicate, and entertain ourselves. Then there's Palm CEO Ed Colligan, who confidently stated in 2007, iPhone will be a niche product. He underestimated not just the iPhone's appeal but the massive cultural shift it would ignite. Today, smartphones are indispensable, shaping everything from social media to navigation, and even further back, Western Union dismissed one of the most revolutionary inventions in history. In an internal memo from 1876, they concluded, "This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication." The telephone, of course, would go on to connect the world in ways they couldn't have imagined. These examples serve as powerful reminders that even industry leaders and experts can be blinded by their own certainty. Expert overconfidence stems partly from what psychologists call theory-induced blindness, commitment to theoretical frameworks that filter evidence and constrain thinking. As Tetlock explains, wherever theory-induced blindness exists, a simple algorithm will outperform an expert who has conscious access to more information. The institutional structures surrounding expert judgment often exacerbate rather than mitigate overconfidence. Media environments reward bold, unqualified predictions over careful, hedged assessments. Academic incentives promote novel, counterintuitive claims over incremental improvements to existing knowledge. Government and business settings frequently punish expressions of uncertainty as weakness, while rewarding decisiveness regardless of outcome. This systematic overconfidence among experts undermines public trust in legitimate expertise, while simultaneously leaving societies vulnerable to poor decisions based on overconfident judgments. The challenge lies not in abandoning expertise, which remains essential for complex decision-making, but in creating systems that better calibrate expert confidence and reward accurate uncertainty estimates. Mitigating overconfidence begins with awareness of our vulnerability to this bias. Specific strategies can help us calibrate our confidence more accurately. Seek disconfirming evidence. Deliberately search for information that might contradict your beliefs or expectations. As Charles Darwin noted, I had during many years followed a golden rule, namely, that whenever a published fact, a new observation, or thought came across me which was opposed to my general results, to make a memorandum of it without fail, and at once. For I had found by experience that such facts and thoughts were far more apt to escape from the memory than favorable ones. Consider alternatives before making decisions. Generate multiple explanations or possibilities. Research shows that simply considering alternative outcomes reduces overconfidence in predictions. Next time you're certain about a forecast, force yourself to generate 3 plausible alternative scenarios. Conduct pre-mortem analysis. Imagine your plan has failed, then work backward to determine what could have caused the failure. This technique, developed by psychologist Gary Klein, helps identify risks that overconfidence might otherwise mask. Before your next major project launch, gather your team and ask, "It's 6 months from now, and our project has failed completely. What happened?" Track your predictions. Create a log of your forecasts from election outcomes to project timelines, along with your confidence level for each. When outcomes become known, score your accuracy. This personal feedback system will gradually calibrate your confidence to match your actual performance. Adopt probabilistic thinking. Express uncertainty in numerical terms rather than vague verbal expressions. This forces more precise calibration of confidence levels and acknowledges the inherent uncertainty in most situations. Recognize expertise boundaries. Develop awareness of where your knowledge ends and speculation begins. As Confucius wisely noted, real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. As physicist Richard Feynman advised, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. This admonition captures the essence of fighting overconfidence. Recognizing our natural tendency towards self-deception is the first step toward more accurate self-assessment. While overconfidence operates at the individual level, its cumulative impact shapes societies, institutions, and public discourse in profound ways. In democratic systems, voter overconfidence in their political knowledge leads to support for simplistic solutions to complex problems and vulnerability to populist rhetoric that offers certainty in place of nuance. Studies show that the least politically knowledgeable citizens are often the most confident in their political opinions. In financial markets, overconfidence contributes to speculative bubbles and crashes. When investors become excessively confident in their ability to predict market movements, they create collective delusions that can destabilize entire economies. In organizational contexts, Overconfidence distorts hiring and promotion decisions when those with limited competence but high confidence outshine more capable but modest candidates. How many times have you seen the most confident, rather than the most competent person selected for leadership? Understanding overconfidence reveals a fundamental paradox of human cognition. Confidence, while essential for action and influence, can undermine the very outcomes it seeks to achieve when it exceeds our actual capabilities. The path to better decision-making lies not in eliminating confidence, but in calibrating it, aligning our subjective certainty with objective reality. This calibration requires embracing what philosopher Bertrand Russell called the fundamental cause of the trouble, the illusion that our knowledge is more certain than it is. True wisdom may lie not in absolute certainty, but in what psychologists call intellectual humility, the recognition of the limits of our knowledge and the fallibility of our judgment. As Socrates wisely observed, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. In a world of increasing complexity and rapid change, the ability to acknowledge uncertainty becomes not a weakness, but a strength. It allows us to remain open to new information, adapt to changing circumstances, and learn from our inevitable mistakes. By understanding and mitigating our tendency toward overconfidence, we open ourselves to deeper learning, more productive discourse, and ultimately better decisions. And in doing so, we take the first step toward genuine wisdom, the kind that begins not with proclamations of certainty, but with the courage to doubt. Before dismissing this message, ask yourself, in what areas of your life might you be overconfident right now? What important decisions could benefit from more calibrated assessment of your knowledge and capability? The answer might surprise you.